Welcome back to Superliminal, and thank you for tuning in. And today I have my lovely friend Paul Wain on the Superliminal podcast. Now, I wanted to invite him onto the show because I've had some really incredible guests on Superliminal so far. And a lot of these guests recently have been talking about the macro view of human awakening. And I wanted to get more of a grassroots element to the conversation. And Paul is a Reiki Master, healer and teacher with a really, really interesting story and a vast wealth of experience. But he's very much a hands-on, boots on the ground, everyday kind of guy. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. And we share a fabulous conversation about his awakening process. And I think one of the key things about this conversation is that it shows that we can get something on an intellectual level, as Paul did, and as I did for many years in my own process, in terms of what it means to reconnect with ourselves. But sometimes it takes years for that intellectual awareness to then drop into a heartfelt, oh, I understand now, where our vision and our perspective on life massively transforms, and we get a complete view that we never really tuned into before. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to you listening to the conversation. And again, thanks as always for tuning in. As always, if you can please like, subscribe, comment and share to help with the algorithm, that'll be lovely. But for now, enjoy the conversation and I'll see you in a moment. Hello everyone, welcome back to Superliminal and thank you again for tuning in. As you'll have seen from the intro video, I have my friend and the lovely Paul Wain here to speak with us today. Now, when we were talking off camera, there were so many different places we could have gone with today's conversation because of Paul's vast wealth of experience. But what we decided to focus on was something that's really, really important at the moment, and that is that humanity is awakening. And what I wanted Paul to share was what his experience of that is, how he's helping people to do that, and to share the wisdom that he's gained over many, many years of living life and many, many years of helping clients. Because Paul, as I've already said, Paul is a Reiki Master, coach and healer. And I was fascinated to get that sort of boots on the ground view as to where people are at in the awakening process, because it's really all about helping people to come back to themselves and remember, as I say, probably on every introduction, on every podcast, for us to remember that we are immortal, ineffable, incredible manifestor creators who've just forgotten that that's who we are. But anyway, let's get on with the show. Paul, thank you ever so much for choosing to come on to the podcast, and welcome to Superliminal.
Thanks very much, Franco. It's a delight to be on. When I first met you a few years ago, there was something about the energy between us which just sort of clicked anyway. I tend to get that sort of feeling with some people, but not all. But it's great to be invited onto this and to share the journey that I've been on and where we're going with it. And it's because it has been such a delight to get on this journey, really, compared to the journey I was on, which was fine at the time, but it came to an abrupt end a few years ago, and left me in an awful place. But me being me, I sort of fought my way out of it, and I'm really pleased to be able to share sort of that journey and some of the info that I've got from there and some of the experiences that I've had through that. So yes, thank you, Franco, for inviting me on.
Fantastic! It's my absolute pleasure. And as we were saying off camera, mate, it's the conversation today is very much along the same lines as the conversation that our mutual friend Jade de Cruz, who introduced us originally via the time you were on her show. It's very much the same, isn't it? It's about it really is time for humanity to really wake the hell up and remember who it is, because in terms of what's going on with the global control agenda and where things are going, it's not a nice to have, it's a we have to. But before we get onto that, and before you share your perspective on that, let's go right back to the very beginning when Paul Wain arrived in this crazy world that we live in. So tell us a bit about your journey, what that looked like, what happened, and then the sort of epiphany that you had that
Mm-hmm.
completely course corrected and put you back on, I don't want to use the right path, but the path that you chose to incarnate here to come on.
Without a doubt, the journey that we're on just now just feels right. Whether it's if right's the right word or not, but it resonates with me anyway. So that's where I am with it, and is expanding all the time just now. But yeah, going back to the beginning, which is about 100 years ago now. So not quite, but yes, I was a baby boomer of the born in 1960, to parents that had both been in World War II, and had come through that with the various tragedies that sort of brought with it for themselves. But it was a great upbringing, in the main for me. And yeah, they had a number of tragedies, as I say, so which they hardly ever spoke about, because they very much, I suppose, their journey came through one of living in the moment, living for the future rather than living for the past. But for them, it came with a little bit of anxiety, I'm sure, through those tragedies. But yeah, so my childhood was pretty decent. And I only found out recently that it did involve a level of bullying done to myself, which sort of which gave me a sort of a darker foundation to sort of come from. I didn't realize that at the time. I thought everything was great. I only realized that within the last sort of decade. But it gave me some tools, some things to be able to become Paul Wain, or what I thought was Paul Wain there. But those tools became barriers, they became boundaries or not boundaries, but walls that I boxed myself in with. And masks that I was able to put on. I know through my work with a men's mental health charity called Andy's Man Club, I know through my work with that I'm absolutely not alone in sort of some of these things. And many people have had difficult backgrounds that they've come through, and some significantly more difficult than my background. However, we all have what we've come through, and we all go on to this journey. So yes, I left school at 16, did an engineering apprenticeship, moved up. So that was down in Middle England in Stoke-on-Trent. Moved up to Dundee, 1984, and started working in industry. I had a love for hill walking, photography, being outdoors generally, actually being on the water. I loved being on the water. And as a Pisces, I should love being in the water, but I don't. Find it a bit cold. But so that was that journey. So coming up to Scotland was beautiful, because all of those outdoor pursuits were there on my doorstep. The rugby, the hill walking, the being on the water. I live by the sea now, and it's just delightful. So life went on. That was fine. But round about 30 years old, I started to find that there were difficulties in my life. But I didn't understand them. I hadn't got a clue what it was all about. And then I was married, the kids were born. Life was great from, looking out from the outside, but there was always something missing. And I remember having a number of conversations with people saying, gosh, just one more thing and I'll be okay. It'll be great. But it never was until sort of fairly recently, really. So yes, went on that journey, enjoying life, working in industry, which has its sense of not hardships, but there was a sense of bluntness to industry, which is good to get exposed to, in my opinion. Anyway, it takes off some rough edges, that's for sure, and the rugby the same. As then I go through life. As I was coming through in my 50s, I retired at 58, which was 6 years ago now. And was absolutely uncomfortable with where I was in life, and I didn't know why. Um, I sadly, I suppose it is sad, really, that it ended up in a separation with my wife, because she's a great girl. Uh, but I was in a pretty dark place by this time, and the through that darkness, you get stripped back to some raw emotions and some raw places that you've possibly done yourself. You know, people have possibly done to you. You feel as though people have done some horrible things to you. You feel as though the world's against you. But also you look at things and you think, you know what? I've not been a fantastic guy myself. I've been a bit crappy at times. Um, and those dark places teach you that sort of you get stripped back to that, so those sort of thoughts. And then leading on that, what leads that on then too, because I'm fairly open-minded about pretty much everything. I'm always looking as a sort of engineer. You come across problems and you're looking for a solution. You don't come across problems and think, well, that's the end of that. Then I'll just leave it. I was always looking for something, some way out of these things, and open to connections. At that time, sort of Jade appeared at some point in my life, yourself as well. Other sort of my Reiki Master, as she is now, appeared in my life. A coach, James McCourty, appeared in my life. And you could almost say, these people have come out of nowhere. Why are they now in my life? And why have all the people that were in my life, the vast majority of them have just drifted away? So what
Was there a
happened?
big was there a big epiphany moment, Paul, that you think that you think changed your frequency to then start bringing those people towards you?
Uh, Yes, I was okay. Let's look at my ex-wife. She suggested that we go to some counselling, and yes, there was an epiphany moment, and I'll come to that. That's a great point, Franco. Actually, she suggested we go to counselling. Me coming from the background that I came from, I thought counselling. What a piece of nonsense that is. But I'll go. You know,
That's
for
the polite
goodness sake.
version, isn't it?
It is the polite version. Thank you. It's for the pre watershed version. Um, the So I went along, and I think it was possibly session two, uh, where I suddenly had this, and we'll call it an epiphany at that time. Gosh, somebody's listening to me, and I felt for the first time that somebody was asking a question, which is a classic counselling question. And how does that make you feel, Paul? Um, and it was like, oh, nobody's ever asked me that before. But it allowed me to speak. And that led to some more conversations. And I realized, goodness me, I love this. I love being able to speak and express myself in the way that I wanted to. Um, so all of this background leading up to this point, including I'm going to go into the anxiety of my parents, which was through the loss of their second born and the loss of my dad's brother through the war and various other things. So they had a level of sort of guardedness. Some of that would have been passed on to me without me knowing and without them knowing, really. So all of that background and the bullying episodes and stuff, suddenly I realized that all that had done is put barriers up. Then this moment of, goodness me, I can speak, and somebody's asking me how I feel, was marvelous. It was a start. I would call that the start of the epiphany, if you like. Then through various other people that came into their life at that time, people just wanted me to start talking. And one of the things, and I think it's a Tony Robbins thing, is he has a thing called the voice, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it is about having your voice. And I started to be able to have a voice, but the voice wasn't at that time. It wasn't perfectly me. It wasn't. It was very raw. I was sort of finding myself inwardly, but the light at the end of the tunnel, which wasn't there before, was now starting a little speck in the distance. And I thought, this is a journey that I need to go down. And then various other things happened. the the whole energy of me started to change. And there is always the life. We go through this human experience to experience life. Life isn't shiny rainbows and unicorns. Life is sometimes pretty crappy, sometimes beautiful. I now go to the place where actually life is always beautiful, but sometimes there's some darker parts of life which are also beautiful because they're teaching you stuff, or they're opening your eyes to other things, or you're looking for other things. There was another epiphany which came at some point when I was talking to my Reiki master. Behind my Reiki, when I was talking to her, behind my Reiki master was this beautiful picture of the sun shining through the trees onto a river. And to me, that there was shafts of bright light and shadows. And that was, I looked at that picture, and the conversation with the Reiki master at that time, Anne, was around the fact that not everything's bright and shiny, but also not everything's dark and miserable. And this picture encapsulated that. And Leonard Cohen has the one of his songs, Anthem, I think it's called, has this phrase in it: "It's the cracks that let the light in." All of that made a lot of sense to me. It started to come together as actually it is the beauty of the shafts of light shining through the trees, and you see it in clouds as well. You know, this, I live by the sea, so quite often the clouds are over, the sun's behind the clouds, but there are shafts of sunlight coming through, and darker shadows. That's life. It's been my experience of this human life is the one where it's the yin yang. You need both the light and the dark to complete the whole. And I often wear some light and dark just to remind me of. I don't need reminding today, but or these days, but it's the light and the dark, and the beauty is in the whole, the light and the dark. And these are moments where I've got to today, where even recently I've been through some darker periods, but the journey has taught me that in this awakening, in this sort of waking up to the energy side of life, so the energy that sits behind Paul Wain as a human, there's an energy that's behind that. We could call it the I am, we could call it the I, whichever phrase you want to use, has become increasingly, and for me, sorry, that is part of the waking up. So as a human, we are what we are, but when we start to make contact with this energy that's just behind, the energy has always been there, but we've been covering it up with life, really. And when you start to uncover some of that stuff, when you start to take some of that baggage away and look at it rather than push it down within yourself, which I'd done for 58 years, I was pushing everything down, thinking, don't need to deal with that, that's fine, and feeling fine with it until you don't feel fine with it. And then at some point, you have to take some of this baggage out and actually have a look at it. My coach, James, he says, go and deal with these things. I kind of didn't know what that meant at the time, deal with it. And I thought, yeah, okay, I'll go and deal with it. But I didn't know how to. I had no tools in that toolbox. So gradually over the time, with my coach, with my Reiki master, and with some other people like Jade and yourself, you get snippets of conversation which really resonate, and you think, right, how am I going to actually deal with that? What does that mean? And for me, it started with actually just bringing it out of yourself, bringing it out of that pressure cooker, the way you've stuffed everything, out of that dark and dusty room where you've locked it. Unlock the door, open the door, think, this is a horrible room, but I need to empty it. Bring some stuff out, have a look at it and think, gosh, what is that? How does that make you feel? Where do I feel it in my body? Where do I feel it in my head, in my heart, solar plexus, whatever, in my gut? Where do I feel this horrible thing? And then you can that's starting the dealing with it. So you get this thing in front of you, have a look at it, and you think, oh, that person, again, this is the clean version, that person, they did this horrible thing to me. oh, that's horrible. And then you think, wait a minute, I allowed that horrible thing to be done to me. I put myself in that position for that horrible thing to be done with me. I could have made a different decision. It's 20 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever. So you're not going to change that decision that was made. But what you can do is you can have a look at that thing and think, I let my boundaries sort of, I don't particularly like the word boundaries because I don't want them to be a constraint. I'd like to think of them more fluid than that. But my boundaries weren't there at that time, so I allowed it to happen. And then when you can start to look at it from your own perspective, of what could I do about it? That's dealing with it. So you think, right, okay, I didn't like that. I'm actually not going to do that again. This thing that you've brought out of the pressure cooker or out of the dusty room can actually be put to one side now. You've dealt with that. You've looked at it and thought, I didn't like it. It still makes me feel horrible, but I know now that actually I didn't want to deal. So there's a teaching in there, I suppose you could call it. So these epiphanies have come in the last few years, the last 5, 6, 7 years. There was probably things happening before that. There's little snippets of things like I did start to do yoga 10 years ago, which was like trying to do yoga with a plank of wood. But as but the point of it being that my yoga teacher at the time, fantastic bloke, is built like a rubber band and super guy. He said to me, Paul, it's taken you 50 years to get that stiff. You're not going to get rid of that in 5 minutes or in one yoga session, but you will get rid of it if you just do a little bit every day, a little bit more and a little bit more, and just keep at it. And that was another little epiphanies. These little epiphanies have come through, if there are such things as little epiphanies, because I suppose the nature of an epiphany is it's boom, but there's little booms along the way. And so that was a thing. So when I came to this sort of spiritual awareness, this energetic awareness, this soul awareness that's behind the human being, the it was a I was able to take all these little tools that had been given for the last few years and sort of apply them, start to realize the little tools in your toolbox so that when you draw these things out, and they're coming out still to this day because it's just like, as my yoga teacher said, it's taking you 50 years or 60 years to get to this. You're not going to clear everything in a moment. You're going to clear it. It's going to clear over time. And actually, when you start taking some of that stuff off the top, you realize there's stuff underneath that. And then you take that out and there's stuff tucked away in the corners and you think, oh God, I remember that now. So yes, so
It's
there's all these things
it's
that are coming
something.
out. Um,
Yeah, it's something I've only learned to make peace with recently, Paul, is that realizing that, we do this work and we think we've healed and it comes back and we do some more and we think we've healed and it just keeps going and going and going. But it's like you come back to it in a spiral, don't you? Like the next time it comes around in whatever circumstance, you think the initial response from me is frustration. And then I'm like, oh, hang on a minute. I'm not as intensely I'm not imbibing it as intensely as I did the first time I experienced it. You see it from a larger space of awareness. And I wanted to bring that up just simply because it's really important for us all to understand that this journey never stops. The healing never stops. It gets easier. It gets quicker. But it never ends. Whilst we're still in our bodies, it always comes round, but it comes round in a spiral, doesn't it?
it does. And I've come to realize that's okay. It's it is where and it's great the way it comes around, and you get little pauses in that. You get little pauses of I suppose I'm going through one at the moment. Just sort of feeling just beautiful, feeling just great, at peace, whatever you want to call it. Knowing that, gosh, what's going to happen? Is there something going to come up next week? I have a meditation retreat to go on in November for a week with Rupert Spira, and
Oh, wow. Love
yes,
that.
again, this is the universe, the energy of the universe responding, if you like, to as I started to waken up and started to open up more, and my energy was one that was now going out into universe. Rather, yeah, you could argue that your energy is always in the universe. So, excuse me. And however, I was allowing it. What the key here is, I was starting to listen. Then I was starting to think. If something came across the front of my vision in some way, whichever format it would, I would have a quick look at it and see if it was for me, or if it wasn't. Which previously I would say, I was very much a people pleaser, so I would wait for something to happen that I could go and solve for somebody else, and I could go and
Yeah.
and that was the thing. That's okay. I've recently realized it's actually okay to solve things for other people, rather than solve it for them, but give them a hand to solve it. It's okay, that is, rather than not, oh, I can't, I'm a people pleaser, so I'm not going to do anything for anybody else. Actually, that's not very good either. So, but it's okay for me to be me. So through this journey, probably I'm going to say within the last sort of 12 months, really, it started to come in with when I did Reiki. Now, I've been doing Reiki for 35 years. So back in the day of when I started that, it was a really strange, quirky little thing, this Reiki was. But for some reason, and I don't, I know now that it was because the energy was coming from the universe to get me down that route. But for some reason, at that time, I didn't know why I was doing it, but I just knew it resonated. So of recent times, what I did was, back in those times, I would follow the prescription of how I'd been taught. And I thought, right, that's the way to do it because that's how I was taught it. That was fine until a few years ago, when I found, actually, this is a little bit clunky. It doesn't feel quite right. So I started to bring Paul Wain into it. I started to say, what would Paul do here? And that also comes from the voice. So the journey of finding my voice allowed me to then say, well, actually, Paul Wain's okay. The way Paul Wain wants to do Reiki is a little bit like this. And if things come up that sort of change my format for my prescriptive way of doing Reiki, if things were like, oh, wait a minute, Paul, just have a listen to what's going on here and move with that move with the energy that's coming through, rather than be prescriptive. And then the flow of that started to work beautifully.
Yeah, and I think that's important, mate, because I often have this conversation with people about any new modality that we learn. We have to learn it prescriptively to then unlearn it,
Mm.
because it becomes a level, we get it to a level of unconscious competence, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
And then we start to trust ourselves, and then, exactly as you just described, we trust ourselves that actually, now that we've learnt the core framework of something, we can now do what we want with it, inspired by our true self, inspired by our deeper wisdom. Because it's so important to remember that, although, like, masters in any discipline are wonderful if you choose the right one that's aligned for you,
Mm-hmm.
they're simply guides at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the day. And once we've got a basic level of competence doing any kind of healing modality or self-connection modality, we've got to know, not learn or believe, but know that we can trust the core essence of who and what we are, which is these infinite, immortal, ineffable creator beings that are connected to all that is. And so if we get out of our heads and into our hearts and trust that, as you did, then magic happens, and the magic that's right for you happens. And it takes me back to a point you were making, a small point you made earlier, but I think it's a really important one to go back to. You were saying in the second session of the counseling that you had with your former wife that you realized, goodness me, I can actually speak and be heard. And what I wanted to bring up with that is that, as men, that is such a powerful, powerful, powerful moment, because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the time, as men, we have these crazy dysfunctional ideas about how we're supposed to show up. We either overcompensate with bravado, and overcompensate with an intense, dysfunctional flavor of masculinity, Or we end up going the other way, where we're just very, very passive and laid back and completely and utterly out of our masculinity and into the feminine. And so I want you to share just for a moment, if you will, Paul, how important was that for you in terms of your own masculinities, your own identity as a man, and and what's the broader lesson you'd share with other men about that moment when you suddenly realized, oh wow, I can speak and I can also be heard as well, but in an authentic and wholesome way.
Massive. I just had a shiver going back down my spine then when you were talking about that, and I was trying to think, how big is it in my life to have my voice and to be Paul? It's it's possibly the most important thing that as Paul Wain, as the human or as the energy behind the human, it is the most important thing to do and to be. And I'll explain that. I'll expand on that a little. The being me part of, and we'll just use Reiki as the framework because it goes into all parts of my life now. The being me bit, but just use Reiki. When I do Reiki as Paul Wain now, with the foundation, the framework of Reiki, the people that want, I'm attracting people, or people will come to me because I'm doing it that way. They may not understand that. They may not consciously sort of do that, but they'll come to me because I'm me. So the being me part of it is essential, not just for me though. And this is a big part of where I am at the moment. For me, the light came on when that happened. I was able to realize that within me, there is a diamond. And if I just contain it with me for the moment, within me, there was a diamond. And there was a moment where I actually needed to actually let that diamond shine. Let Paul Wain shine. Because the journey for me of the energy that's behind, oh gosh, I'm going all shivery here, but the journey of the essence behind me,
Same here, mate. My heart's just bursting out my chest. It's so beautiful to hear.
the essence that's behind me has to experience life through Paul Wain. And so Paul Wain is essential in that life, for me, for my essence behind, for my energy, for the universe. For the universe, it's essential for me. However, the absolute thing now, that is a key for everything that I will do from now on, is to allow that diamond to shine as bright as it can do and attract the people, allow people to come that are drawn to that light. And it won't be for everybody, because other people will go to Franco or other people will go to somebody else. And that's beautiful. That's how it should be. There is a sort of tribal thing to this thing. But it became clear to me that in this awakening, in this spiritual human connection, whatever we want to call it, there are some people that are drawn to me that are in that dark and dusty room still. And just through a conversation with them, and just in some ways, I don't personally now like to share my story a lot, because for me personally, I've come a journey and I'm going forward with that journey. I don't particularly want to look back for myself. But if somebody asks me the question, well, tell me about your journey, and I will explain it, although some of it's getting a bit rusty now, because I've kind of put a lot of it, I've dealt with a lot of the packages and put them behind. Excuse me, and I'm moving on. But if it helps that person then to look at it and say, gosh, I can resonate with that, that gives them permission, this person that's in that dark and dusty room, it gives them permission to be able to just even crack the door open a little bit, possibly, or maybe turn the key in readiness to come outside of that dark and dusty room. I think that is one of the most beautiful things when I've and to allow people to have their voice. Because one thing is, I absolutely do not want somebody to have my voice. I don't want that. I want them to have their voice. But it's a blooming scary thing sometimes to realize that you've got that voice. and you have to go through a journey to sort of build up the strength, if you like, to be able to start to speak. I had some great teachers along the way, so yes, I am absolutely happy with that. But for me to have that voice is enormous. And I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know where it's going to end up. And actually, do you know what? I'm embracing it all anyway. So it'll end up
Yeah.
in a beautiful place.
You don't need to know, mate, do you? Because
I
we
don't.
just learn to connect with that wisdom. Just in case anybody listening actually doesn't know what Reiki is, can you explain it to us in terms of what it is, and how it helps people?
No, no, I don't mean that literally. I don't mean that literally. Actually, it's a question that I get asked a lot, and I go now to right. I refer to ourselves. I start off. It depends where the other person is. So you tailor it to the other person. Obviously, how you explain things. If they have some spiritual awareness or some energetic experience, then you could maybe tailor it a bit differently. But if somebody's got no experience of Reiki at all, but they've maybe heard the word, maybe not even heard the word, whatever. Uh, if you could imagine yourself on a bus and you're standing there on the bus, you're just holding on to the rail and you're going along, it's all fine, and you think there's a guy behind me, there's somebody behind me, and you look around and there's a person behind you and they're looking at you. You've felt that person's energy, and it's within the aura of your aura connecting with their aura, and there's a connection of energy there, and you felt that without visually seeing them or hearing them, or feeling the sort of heat from them or whatever. You've felt their energy. That could be a starting point, because I think everybody's felt, gosh, somebody's looking at me, and you look to one side and somebody's looking at you from a different direction. I think we've all felt something like that. Or you've thought, I'll give Franco a call. And just before you call Franco, a text comes through from Franco. He says, "Paul, how are you doing? I was just going to give you a call." We've all had little bits of experiences where there's been a connection between people through the aura or the energy. As a starting point, that is an introduction, if you like, to somebody that has no idea. That's a starting point. Then you can develop that into, okay, if you've got this energy around you, if you feel the energy around you, how is that connected to your body? How is that connected to your mind that you've just detected that thing? And then you can sort of introduce chakras, your sort of various chakras that you've got throughout the body, the 7 main ones and so on. I always like to refer to them as the sort of rainbow, not always, but I can describe it as rainbows, because I love a rainbow anyway, but the sort of the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violets, so they all have a color. So you have these chakras which are in your body, but in your energetic body, connecting to your aura, which allows the aura to detect stuff from other people or whatever to your body, to your mind initially, to your heart, possibly to your own chakras. So you can sort of develop that, bring that into the conversation. And then you can sort of say, well, sometimes these chakras get a little bit blocked or a little bit out of balance or whatever. And you maybe need to sort of, through experiences, through some hard experiences or whatever, you may become closed down because you've had something happened in your childhood or something happened at work that's, you felt, gosh, I can't speak. So my throat chakra was very blocked when I started this journey, and that needed to open up. You've probably gathered by now that I'm able to speak a bit, but my heart was also sort of very closed down. So when I first went for Reiki, so bringing Reiki into it now, I met a practitioner. She said to me, "So why are you here, Paul?" And I said, "I haven't got a clue. I don't know, but I thought I'd just come along and see what it's all about." She says, "Are you feeling sort of a little bit uncomfortable at the minute?" This was 30 odd years ago. I says, "Well, yeah, I just don't feel right." She says, "Would is it all about then feeling a little bit better?" I said, "Yeah, I suppose you could describe that. That's how it would feel. I want to feel a bit better." So what she did with me, she just put her hands in various positions on my body. There's absolutely, you're clothed. There's very much discretion. There's no discomfort to any of it wherever you put your hand. And I'll always have a conversation with somebody beforehand to see how they are with me putting, because you don't have to touch the body, you could be off the body, it doesn't matter. But I personally like the connection as well of the body. But so it's it's lovely. But that person then that's delivering the Reiki, or being the channel for the Reiki rather than delivering it, because all the energy is coming from the universe. And that's something a little bit difficult for some people to understand. But there's energy all around us. And was it Einstein, everything is energy, us, the world around us, and so on. So the energy is coming out of there, and it's being channeled through this Reiki deliverer, this Reiki practitioner, into your chakras. So what that Reiki then is doing is looking at that chakra and saying, what needs to happen here? Does this chakra blocked, or is it out of alignment, or is it in fact too open? That could be something for some people. They need to be balanced. The chakras need to be balanced. So in the process of a Reiki session, and maybe it'll take a few, I personally prefer to do more than a couple of Reiki sessions, because in the first one you're gaining a sort of a connection with the person. In the second one, you sort of digging a little bit deeper into that person's energy. Third or fourth Reiki session is just lovely, because that person's energy is starting to get more balanced. They're starting to feel a little bit more like themselves. They maybe have a very long journey to go on, like I did, but that's the starting point of it, and it'll lead on to other things, no doubt. So in a nutshell, energy around us, it gets channeled through a Reiki practitioner into your chakras, into your body, to balance up things where there's been some trauma or damage done in the past that needs to be dealt with. And it'll allow the person. And I often say, if nothing else, that person's going to have a very relaxing time for 40 minutes or 60 minutes, whichever. Because I work more intuitively now. So whereas I used to look for, 5 minutes in each hand position and or whatever, or 3 minutes or whatever, now I just let it flow. And if I spend all of my time around the head, I'm happy with that, because that's where I need it to be. But so yes, it's all about balancing the chakras, balancing the energy, and looking at those traumas that have happened to help you to deal with them as a human. Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't know if
Because
that was clear or
I
not.
think no, it is. It is. I actually personally found that really helpful,
Thank you.
especially the start of it. I've never heard someone describe it like that. So that was
Okay.
that metaphor was actually really useful, because I love using metaphors in my
Mhm.
professional work, because it just helps people to relate to it. So thank you for that. So off camera, Paul, before we hit the record button, we were discussing the world in terms of where it is. So I'd like to sort of lift the conversation up to sort of just into outer space, and looking down onto our beautiful planet, looking down onto the spirit of Sophia, and looking down at the collective consciousness of humanity. Because although we're all walking around with our individualized points of awareness, there is one global unilateral human consciousness that we're all a part of and we're all contributing to, because of course everything's of a fractal nature in terms of existence. So if we imagine ourselves just into this outer space orbit, and we're looking at our beautiful planet, and we're looking at the beautiful spirit of her and where she sits in the solar system with Helios, our sun, and the galactic consciousness, and you look down and you think, wow, what a beautiful place from up
Mhm.
here. But then you teleport yourself down here and you look around, and, as I've heard someone say recently, no, tell the aliens to come back in another 1,000 years because these lot are absolutely batshit crazy. But that said, there does seem to be an awakening going on
Mhm.
in the global consciousness of humanity, and not before time either. So, from your perspective, mate, how do you see where humanity is at? Where do you see the direction that we're going that we shouldn't be going, or isn't in our best interest to be going? And how does your experience with, I know I'm asking you three questions all at once, but how does your experience of working with people and helping them to heal inform you in terms of where humanity's at? So let's start with the first question. Where do you feel humanity's at in terms of where it needs to go?
Right now, I have a couple of schools of thought on this. I could go down the route of we're in the perfect place for where we need to be, for moving on to the next bit, whatever that is. I could also go down the route of actually it's really messy and we need a lot of light coming into the planet to clean it up.
It's
So
probably both, eh?
I think possibly both, and I've not reached the right conclusion yet. That's coming, but so the where we are, I feel like it's a bit of a cop out to say, oh, where we are is perfect. You know, we're in the right place, exactly where we need to be. If I looked at, just for one thing, mental health, I personally prefer to call it mental fitness. Coming from a bit of a sporty background, if you're starting at one, I suppose this is like coaching as well, really. But if you're starting at one point, which is where you are, and that could be your mental health as it is, and it could be awful, or it could be okay, or it could be fantastic, whatever it is. You're at that point, but you'd like your mental health to be at another point. You'd like to be a bit better. You've got a journey to go on. So looking at a mental fitness scale, you could say, right, I've got somewhere where I want to be, and I'm starting at this point. So I need to read more books, listen to more podcasts, whatever it is. Go and speak to some different people. Have different friendships. Yeah, I was going to go down the route of stop drinking alcohol or whatever, because that's my particular thing. I gave alcohol up a year ago, and
I would agree with you on that one.
yeah,
And turn off the TV as
and
well.
turn off the TV. And I do still do watch the TV, but it's an awful lot less than I used to do.
Yeah. Or more specifically, stop watching the news.
Oh, you took the words right out of my mouth. And every now and again, I will watch the news, but that's okay. I'm fine with just rolling with whatever's right at the time. But a lot of the time, yeah, I don't watch it. So if you can think to yourself, well, I'm going to go on this journey. What do I need to do? There are steps I need to take. Then you can work on that towards a goal. If you think of it in terms of how is your mental health, well, it's not very good just now. But what does that do for you? It doesn't really, make it means that, yeah, I want to be better, but it doesn't give you a structure to get better. Whereas if you call it, in my perspective, mental fitness, then you can say, right, I want to be a bit better fitness wise in my mental health. So I want to be a bit better with that and a bit better. And I'll read a different book and whatever. So on. I've forgotten what the question was now, but which is normal for me. But so where the world, right? We're coming back to where the world is. Yes, a lot of people that I'm coming across in my work now. Over a year ago now, I retrained. So back in the day, I was an engineer for 42 years. Ended up as a product designer in the engineering world, which was fine and dandy. Great opportunities. And then I became a foot health practitioner. It's an obvious next step, I always think. So
Of course.
how does that happen? However, the universe had better ideas for me. So I went down this route, thoroughly enjoy it because it allows me, and the people that come and the patients that come in to see me, it allows us 3/4 of an hour where we can sit. There could be no conversation, or they could become extremely deep conversations and everything in between. So people are asking the questions like, what is Reiki? Or which didn't happen 10 years ago or 15 years ago. People are talking about counseling. People are talking about, I want to be able to talk more, or, I wish I could express myself better. So the awakening is coming in those forms. And where I engage with people, whether it is purely through Reiki or coaching or meditation, or in fact through the foot health, because I see it as an absolutely physical thing where I'm making somebody feel better anyway with their feet, but also there's a conversation. Usually, 90% of the time, there's a conversation happens as well. And I'm humbled by this really, but people go out of the clinic saying, "Do you know what? My feet feel pretty good now, but also I feel a little bit lighter myself." And that is a beautiful thing. There's a little bit of awakening there happening in that moment, and I love that. And they don't teach you that at foot health clinic, foot health college. Uh, the conversation behind it is can be, as important as the physical, act of helping somebody with their whatever's going on in their feet or their legs, in fact. But yes, so I'm seeing the awakening is coming to me in that form now, and I love it. One of the things which I love to see, and it started when I did my work with Andy's Man Club. It happened with me personally, but it's also where, as I became a facilitator with Andy's, you see somebody come in for the first time, and thank goodness they've come in, because it could go a different route, and yeah, trigger warning there, but yeah, that you could go a different route. They walk through the
Yeah.
door, they come in, and they sit down, and they first of all they listen to people, and they listen to people share their stories, and then at some point, maybe that first night or maybe a year later, they will share their story, and it might be the first time that they've ever told somebody that this dark thing happened. And you see in that moment, you see that spark come on in their eyes, and you think, wow, that is beautiful. And I love to see that, because it happened to me. I went down that not a particularly dark patch, as compared to others, but that place where I started to wake up. The alarm clock went off, and I came around, and it was as groggy as anything. And when I can see that in other people, whether it was through Andy's to start with, and I had a good five years with Andy's, it was brilliant. And many blokes came through that door, and the spark came on. I saw that spark come through, and it was beautiful. I see it now in my work with feet, but the other thing is, it's an all-encompassing part of my life now. Not that I've made it go down this direction, but just being able to have conversations with people where they perhaps sort of, for some reason, and I don't know why, except the way that I speak to people, quite often people will say to me, as well as I feel a bit lighter when I walk out, they say, I've actually never said this to anybody else before, but blah, 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 blah. And it's just gorgeous when they do that. I love to see them do that, because they will just be that little step higher in their mental fitness. They've taken a first step of something, and then they'll maybe go speak to somebody else, and they maybe pick up a book or whatever, and they will start to awaken much more themselves. So globally, if you looked at it from the higher perspective downwards, if we did a sort of as an engineer, I like a graph, but also like percentages. So I would say, gosh, when I was 30 years old, 30 odd years ago, on the awakening path, we were maybe 5% awake, maybe less, 1% awake as a globally sort of thing, waking up to the energy that's behind us rather than the human form, experiencing that. We started to become aware and awake to the energy that's behind us. And in that, 1% is built and built and built. Where are we now? Gosh, I've not thought about this before, but we're a good way down the road. We're tens of percentages down the road to awakening globally. I do think that the internet, the social media side of things, of which we're taking part in just now, can be really beneficial in that, but it can also just close us down and constrain us so much that we get so
Yeah.
absorbed in it. I think as a tool, it can be great. It can connect a lot of people. and it can be really useful in the awakening. And it can, the view of somebody walking along the street, looking at their mobile phone, not oblivious to what's going on around them and being absorbed in that thing. Gosh, I don't like that at all. But hopefully that person will wake up a little bit more one day through contact with somebody else, or possibly even see a podcast on social media, which allows them to think, do you know what, I could change things a bit here, because I'm actually not enjoying where I am.
Yeah, I love that, mate, because I really want to celebrate you for what you're doing by creating that safe space for people to open up and have these conversations. Because not only do people feel safe enough to let a little bit of their magic and a little bit of their spark shine out into the world, but you mentioned earlier that they then go home and say, God, this guy doing my feet today, you never would have believed it. We were talking about, and I told him about, and I've never told him about, or whatever. But that has a beautiful ripple effect outwards. So you're not just helping that one person who you've helped through the conversation via the foot therapy. You're helping the people that they go and tell. You're helping the people that they then go and impact, because they're back into a bit more of their heart soul essence. They're back into a bit more of who and what they truly are. So the ripple effect of that is absolutely phenomenal, isn't it? And I just really want to celebrate you for that, mate, because
I appreciate that,
it's
Frankie.
no, you're welcome, because it's thoroughly deserved. But I think one thing I often refer to in these conversations is that we massively underestimate the power of the collective consciousness, and helping these helping create the space for these little ignitions within people has an effect on what, and I refer to this often, what Rupert Sheldrake describes as the morphogenetic field. People will have heard it as the 100 monkeys. If you've not heard that, look it up, do a search on it, and check that out. But what that means is that we are adding to the global collective consciousness bank without realizing it. So the united singular consciousness of humanity, the frequency of it is just going up tiny, 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 tiny little amounts with one person, excuse me, that you work with. And then they go and tell someone else, and it lifts them up a little bit. And then, oh, Mum was telling me about the guy who worked on her feet and blah blah blah, and this happened, and then that person who they then go and tell. You add all these little things together. I mean, and that's how transformation starts, with one tiny little thing that then spreads out, and then collectively. So if these things are going on in, people like us who are doing what we can to remind people of who they are via whatever modality that we use. But fundamentally what we're doing them is taking them back home to who and what they truly are, is that is creating a huge, huge, huge effect on the collective consciousness of humanity. And I think that cannot be underestimated. And I really want to emphasize that point. And for everyone listening to it, I really do want you to be aware of just how important that is. It's like one tiny little piece of good or charity or helpfulness in the world adds to this morphogenetic field, and the effect that has on countering the global insanity that's going on, the control agenda. I don't want to get deep into that in this conversation, but clearly there's a lot of stuff going on in this world to keep us controlled, keep us small, keep us frightened. The more that we do what we've just been talking about in terms of helping people to remember who they are, then the more we transcend that. We don't heal it, we don't fix it, we don't solve the problem. We actually transcend it, and it just because that level of imposition cannot exist in our frequency. If we're connected to the heart, we're connected to the power of who and what we truly are. And we remember that, yes, we're infinite immortal beings that are having an individual human experience. Yes, we're immortal. Yes, we reincarnate if we choose to. I'm certainly not going to be coming here after this lifetime, but that's another story for another time. But we've got to remember how powerful we are, and we've got to remember how important it is for us to stay connected, to be as one, and to live as one. And it brings to mind, Paul, a fabulous, fabulous question you asked when we first connected in Jade's webinar a couple of years ago. I think it's a lovely place to end the conversation, and that is, you asked the question, "What is love?" So I'm going to
Mhm.
ask you that question now, and ask you to share with the superliminal audience. How do you see love? What is it to you?
It's our essence as an energy. So I'm getting shivers again, actually. But love is within all of us. It is our essence. I find it very easy to talk about love with people, and some don't, which is fine. They've got their own journey, because I'm coming from a place of love. Because one of my James, my coach, you've got to love everything. Now I thought, no, you don't. My brother was a bastard or whatever, but also that wasn't the clean version. However,
Oops.
um, but or whatever, but actually, you can love that horrible thing for how it's helped you to develop. You don't have to like it, and that's different, but you can love it. And love
Great point.
comes, yes, and love comes from within. Joy, happiness, love, they're all in here. You don't have to go to look for them. They're all here. Massive part of my journey is being able to love myself. That's another podcast, but the so the journey of coming from a place of worthlessness, which is where I was, and I found out that that's where I was, to a place of worthiness. So you're coming from a place of the question of am I worthy, to the statement of I am worthy. It's the same three words, you just have a different format. Gosh, for me, that took me years,
And
five.
isn't and
Yeah.
isn't it funny, mate, how once we actually have that huge realization and it drops into our heart,
Hmm.
and then we then go, what have I been doing for all this time? How did I even think that was real? Well, we know why, because of conditioning,
Yeah.
well-meaning but dysfunctional parents passing on their own programming, society, schools, everything. But it goes from telling ourselves that we're worthy as an intellectual idea to just a knowing, and and
Knowing.
and then it goes from I am worthy to just I am.
Absolutely. Because the worthiness then becomes irrelevant, because you just are. And what you are, we use the word love. We can describe ourselves. I am love. I am Paul, is the human form. I am, which is behind the energy behind that. But that energy is just love. And it connects with all the other love that's around. And so what is love? As a question which I would have asked 2 or 3 years ago, I just know now, as you say, I just feel, I just know I am, and that's it. It's sort of difficult. It almost feels like I'm shortchanging the question, but actually, it's not a complicated answer. And it doesn't need to be.
Well, I think the difference is I understand why you say that, but I also understand exactly what you mean when you say that it isn't as well, because to feel that it's shortchanging as an answer just to say I am, that response lives in the head.
Mm.
But when we take that
And to
down
hear.
into here and we say I am, oh, I'm just getting goosebumps even just
Hmm.
saying that, because not just for me, but I feel my connection to the whole of humanity, the whole of the plant
Hmm.
kingdom, the animal kingdom, the aquatic kingdom, everything.
Hmm.
Because even though we're these individual points of awareness, like I'm this Franco avatar, you're the Paul avatar, the people listening are whatever avatar name they have, fundamentally, we're the awareness that belongs in these avatars, and
Hmm.
this awareness that is intimately quantumly interconnected to all that is, has been, and never can be. So thank you. That's just such a lovely answer. Thank you, brother. So
Thank you.
it's I could, as I always say at this point in the conversation, I could go on for hours and hours and hours, but it's time to wrap it up. So what I always do is 3 quick fire questions, and the first one is, what are you most excited about right now?
Going to Rupert Spider's retreat. Actually,
Cool.
no. Actually, it isn't. I am excited now about whatever's happening next. It's. I have come to a place through some darkness and some lightness and with some beautiful people that I actually really excited about the next bit as well. But absolutely knowing that we only ever have this moment, and that is all we have. I don't want to live in the future, and I don't want to remember the past too often. Just be in this moment and live it. And that
Love
is
that.
exciting for me. Next
Thank
question.
you. Next question. So, time machine appears in a portal right in front of you, and you just feel called from the heart to get in it. Doors open, you get in. Doors close behind you. You can feel something's going on. You're traveling through space time. You feel the craft land, and the doors open. And to your amazement, you look out, and there's 12-year-old you, that 12-year-old Paul, looking straight back at you.
Yeah.
What 2 bits of advice would you give that lovely young lad, and why?
Probably very similar to what my mum used to say to me as a 12-year-old lad. It's okay to be yourself. So that was my mum's advice. It's okay, just be yourself. You'll be fine. 2 bits of advice. Everything's going to be okay. That's
Magical.
it. Yeah.
And the third and final question for the quick fire is, we've kind of touched on it, but what from your perspective, mate, is the number one thing that's wrong with the world right now, and what one thing would you do to solve it?
Great question. I'm not a massive fan of politicians, of whatever creed or color or whatever. I don't mean skin color. I mean political color,
Yeah.
because we're all the same. So yeah, and I wouldn't get rid of them. I think there's a place that religion as well. I'm sorry to say that I don't have a great, as much as I am very spiritual. There are some rules and some dogmas around which I don't particularly engage with. They can do some damage, I think. But what is wrong with oh gosh, yeah. I suppose we've come through this period of constraint. Right, constraints. We're going to go with constraints. I want people to be unconstrained in themselves and being themselves. We have too many constraints, whether they've been given to us by social media, by the news, by what we are told to think, by education. We are. I so want everybody to shine as themselves. And that's where I would, that if I can do anything, if I can do a smidgen of something today and connect with one person that allows them to hopefully open up their diamond inside and start to shine a bit as themselves, that's where we need to go. Stop the constraints in whatever form they are and start allowing people to shine. If that could happen, that would be beautiful. That would.
So powerful. Thank you. I love that myself. Okay, so before we wrap up then, mate, tell us a bit about your services, what you're doing, and where people can find you.
Okay. I am a foot health practitioner, but a Reiki Master, a meditation deliverer, or whatever you want to call it, and a life coach. I now bizarrely combine all 4 of those things in what I do most of the time. It didn't used to be that. I used to do one thing or another thing. I now combine them all. If I'm doing somebody's feet, they might get a bit of Reiki as well. They'll certainly get a bit of coaching. And the other side of this, they may coach me. So I work in a clinic called At 75, which is in Montefieth in Scotland. We have a full diary, so don't expect your feet to be fixed fairly within the next sort of 5 minutes, but within a few weeks we'll get an appointment for you. I express myself, although this was a few years out of date now, on a website called paulwain.co.uk. So that's PAU. Well, my name's on the bottom of the screen, I think, but .co.uk. And yeah, that's pretty much it, really.
Good stuff.
But the people can get in touch with me through email on paul.wain1@btopenworld.com. I am on. I'm not on Twitter, I don't think. I need a 14-year-old to help me with this, actually. But I'm not on. I'm not on Twitter. Although they would probably say no. I'm on Facebook as Paul Wain. And yes, people can get in touch with me. I don't have any formal sort of way of getting in touch with me. I just roll with what's going.
Yeah, I'll put these in the show notes for
Okay.
people as well. Make it easier. So we're going to wrap it up there. Oh, mate, honestly, such a beautiful, beautiful conversation.
I appreciate that, Franco. Thank you. I
I
loved it.
just Yeah, me too, man. I just loved everything that you shared, and as always, it feels like we've just got started. But perhaps that's an opportunity next year sometime for us to have another chat again. So for everyone still watching, thank you ever so much. Please do subscribe, comment, share using the share function in YouTube, and like as well. If you've got this far, you're still watching, and you've enjoyed it, helps the algorithm get it in front of other amazing people like you who really resonate with the content and with the guests that I've got on. But for now, thank you, everybody, and I will see you all in the next conversation. And thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Franco. Cheers now.
See you
Bye
soon.
bye.